Independent India, the first 30 years, 1947 to 77. The early years after independence is arguably the defining period in India's post independent history. The main challenges before the leadership was the need to maintain unity and integrity, bring about a social and economic transformation, and to ensure the working of the democratic system. First general elections. The first general elections to be held under the new constitution were immensely significant for Indian democracy. It represented India's determination to take the path of democracy after independence from British rule. To overcome the problem of illiteracy, the Election Commission came up with a novel idea of having symbols from everyday life to represent political parties and candidates. One-party dominance in political system. The Congress party formed the government in many of the states as well. Political competition in the one-party dominant system therefore took place within the Congress. The opposition parties therefore only posed a latent and not a real threat. In independent India's first three general elections in 1952, 57, and 62, the Indian National Congress won, reducing other participation to almost nothing. Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Prime Minister of India. None of the other parties individually got more than 11% of the votes polled. The Congress consistently won over 70% of the seats by obtaining about 40% of the total votes cast. No other party was anywhere near the Congress.
Jawaharlal Nehru, the man of destiny. Jawaharlal Nehru was an Indian statesman who was the first Prime Minister of India from 1947 to 1964. He was the longest serving Prime Minister. He is one of the leading figures in the Indian independence movement. Nehru was elected by the Congress Party to assume office as independent India's first Prime Minister.
Demand for state reorganization. Among the first challenges the new nation faced was the demand for reorganization of states on the basis of languages. Social and economic change. The Constituent Assembly had called for social, economics, and political justice and equality of status and opportunity. It put social and economic change at the top of the agenda of modern India. The Planning Commission was set up within a month of the inauguration of the new constitution. The first 5 year plan focused on agriculture and stressed on the need for increasing food production, development of transport and communication, and the provision of social services. For Nehru, agricultural transformation was not simply an economic issue but a political, social, and economic transformation of the rural sector. Land reforms were implemented in a half-hearted manner across India. While Jamindari system was abolished, redistribution of land to the landless did not take place. The rich and the powerful in the rural areas continued to control most of the land. Foreign policy and wars. When India became independent, the Cold War had just begun and the world was being polarized into countries in the US or USSR camp. Jawaharlal Nehru followed a policy of not joining either camp and tried to maintain an equidistant and independent position in foreign policy. The succession. With the death of Nehru in 1964, critics raised doubts as to whether democracy itself would survive or would it, like other countries, lose its democratic ethos. The Congress, however, managed a successful transition with the choosing of Lal Bahadur Shastri as its leader in government. Anti-Hindi agitation. When the Official Language Act was passed in 1963, the DMK believed it was an attempt to foist Hindi on the rest of the country, and they began a statewide campaign protesting the imposition of Hindi. These included strikes, dharnas, and hartals, burning effigies, Hindi books, as well pages of the Constitution. Green Revolution. The debates regarding the development strategy was not simply an economic one but also had political implications. While Nehru and the left of center group within the Congress favored the state control and institutional strategy in agriculture, there was right of center faction which was opposed to state control. They constantly criticized the programs and attempted to water down the proposals. Since this group was most powerful at the state level, they also ensured that most radical plans were not implemented properly. Once it became clear that the existing strategy was not increasing food production, there was a shift to different strategy between the years 1964-67. This attempted to secure the cooperation of the state governments as well as increase food production. This is called as period of Green Revolution. Rise of regional parties and regional movements. The 1967 election was a landmark election in the history of India. It showed that elections had come to be taken very seriously and had a life of their own. By this time, there were gainers and losers from the economic development process, and this changed the pattern of political competition. This was the first big transition in India. In many states in the north, where it had won narrow victories, its members defected to opposition parties. Consequently, the Congress government fell and they were replaced by Samyukta Vidyak Dal (SVD) governments. These were basically a coalition of legislators against the Congress made up Jansangh, Socialists, Swatantra, and the Congress defectors, besides local parties. The new governments are an important marker in India's political history because it was, in a way, the first democratic upsurge. Many of these SVD governments were short lived. Their life was marked by defections and corruption. Power seemed to be the only thing that united them. This period saw a renewal of regional sentiment in different parts of the country. In Andhra Pradesh, there was a demand for the separation of Telangana. In Assam, a new state called Meghalaya was created in December 1969 out of the tribal districts of Khasi, Jaintia, and Garo Hills.
Britain prepared to end nearly a century of rule over the Indian subcontinent and its 390 million people. Hindus were concentrated in central and southern India, Muslims in Bengal and the northwest. A British commission divided the territory into majority Muslim Pakistan and majority Hindu India. In the chaos that followed partition, 15 million people fled across the new borders and 500,000 died in rioting. 4 border regions saw the worst of it: Sindh, Bengal, Punjab, and Jammu and Kashmir. Among India's 565 princely states, only Jammu and Kashmir had a Hindu Maharaja ruling over a majority Muslim population. India claimed the Maharaja decided to join India. Pakistan disputed this. In October, Pashtuns from Pakistan's northwest frontier province invaded Kashmir with the support of Pakistan's government. In October of 1947, the Maharaja left Srinagar. Indian troops were airlifted in, but were ill prepared for the cold and altitude. Pakistan responded with its own campaign, and India approached the United Nations to broker a ceasefire, which went into effect on January 1, 1949, establishing a line of control, but no final border. In 1962, China attacked India in the Aksai Chin region of Kashmir, easily defeating India's poorly equipped Himalayan troops. China retains control of the Aksai Chin today. 3 years later, encouraged by China's success, Pakistan sent troops across the line of control dressed as Kashmiri locals. The fighting proved brief and inconclusive. On September 22nd, both sides agreed to a UN-backed ceasefire. Another brief war broke out over East Pakistan in 1971, this one conclusive. East Pakistan seceded, 10 million refugees streamed into West Bengal, and with India's help, Bangladesh was born. In 1999, after both India and Pakistan had successfully tested nuclear weapons, full-scale war was barely avoided when Pakistan tried to seize the Kargil region of Indian-controlled Kashmir. At one time, an average of 1 Pakistani soldier every 4 days and 1 Indian soldier every other day died at the Siachen Glacier, and the terrorist attacks in Mumbai in November 2008 were reportedly planned by senior members of Lashkar-e-Toiba, which Pakistan created to fight Indian domination of Kashmir, and which India accuses of terrorist atrocities all over India.
Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi was one of the best known women of the 20th century, was Prime Minister of India and daughter of the former Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and Kamala Nehru, also known as Indira Nehru Gandhi. She was born on November 19, 1917 in Allahabad. She was born in a family that was at the center of India's freedom movement. Indira Gandhi's education took place at a series of Indian schools and at non-British schools in Europe, with a number of private tutorials interspersed between the periods at school. Indira Gandhi married a Parsi named Firoz Gandhi in 1942. Srimati Indira Gandhi had 2 sons, Sanjay Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi, who was again a Prime Minister. In 1959, Indira Gandhi became President of the Indian National Congress, and in 1964, she was elected to the Parliament. After Lal Bahadur Shastri's untimely death in 1966, she was selected as Prime Minister by the party's bosses within the Congress party as a compromise candidate. In her initial days as Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi encountered numerous problems such as Mizo tribe uprisings in the northeast, famine, labor unrest and misery among the poor in the wake of rupees devaluation, and agitations in Punjab for linguistic and religious separationism. Indira Gandhi campaigned fiercely on the slogan of Garibi Hatao, eliminate poverty, during the 5th general elections in March 1971 and won an unprecedented two-third majority. Factionism among coalition partners led to the collapse of the Janata government, and Indira Gandhi came back to the power once again in 1980 after the army had invaded the Golden Temple in Amritsar, the chief shrine of the Sikhs, which had been held as an army camp by a group of militant Sikhs. She became a target for the Sikhs' anger, and on 31st October 1984, she was assassinated by her own Sikh guard.
Bangladesh War. In the early 1970s, trouble was brewing in East Pakistan as a movement for the assertion of Bengali identity and protest against what was seen as a step-motherly treatment by West Pakistan. In the general elections, the party led by Mujibur Rahman won, but he was arrested and taken to West Pakistan, and a period of military repression of East Pakistan began. The lakhs of refugees steamed to India, which had to feed and house them. Meanwhile, a liberation movement started in Bangladesh, and India was asked to assist it. In 1971, a war broke out between India and Pakistan, and India decisively intervened to ensure the liberation of Bangladesh and its establishment as an independent country. The left turn. Indira Gandhi charted a new path for the Congress and herself by introducing new policies and programs. This policy also helped her get control over the party organization. Immediately after victory in the war, using the popular slogan Garibi Hatao, the Congress won with a record margin in the 1971 general elections, and this raised the popularity of Indira Gandhi even more. Among the important legislations that were passed during this period, ostensibly to achieve the goal of social and economic transformation, were the nationalization of many private banks and abolishing of princely pensions. Emergency. The government reacted harshly with series of laws violated civil rights in the name of maintaining order. The opposition also criticized the Prime Minister for personalizing the government. Meanwhile, due to decision of Allahabad High Court, Indira Gandhi was unseated from Lok Sabha for violating some of the provisions of the Representation of the People Act during the 1971 elections. However, she got a stay from the Supreme Court. Few days later, with the JP movement gaining more strength, the government imposed emergency and justified it as necessary to preserve order, save democracy, protect the social and economic transformation, and preserve national integrity. With this, democracy was put on hold. The government began a series of repressive measures, claiming that this was necessary to bring order in the country. The major highlights of this period was the 42nd Constitutional Amendment, which brought about a series of changes.
(1969) The Man on the Moon. Richard Nixon in the White House and Yasser Arafat in the PLO. The Internet and Unix had made their first appearances. India at the time was led by Indira Gandhi. Ram Manohar Lohia had referred to her as Gungi Gudiya. Indira went on to break away from the Morarji Desai group and created her own party that ruled with communist support. Then came a series of measures that established the license Raj. The rupee was devalued 40% against the US dollar. 14 banks were nationalized. Some cried foul, others applauded the move as a masterstroke. And then 1971. Indira raised the slogan Garibi Hatao and propelled her party to power. Even here though, there were question marks and a case that would eventually dismiss her government over rigging began. Seeds for the national emergency of 1975 were sown. It was also a period of turmoil in India's neighborhood. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was elected to power in East Pakistan with a thumping majority, raising political fears for Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in West Pakistan. A policy of repression against East Pakistan led to widespread genocide. India chose deliberately to hold off.
Intervening at that point of time was not militarily the wise thing to do. The monsoons were around the corner and it would have been very difficult for operations to continue. Secondly, the passes were open over the Himalayas and the threat of Chinese intervention was always there.
India did step in December that year to support the Bangladesh Mukti Bahini group to liberate East Pakistan. With Pakistan's surrender, Bangladesh was born and India instituted Sheikh Mujibur Rahman as its first Prime Minister.
This victory established her a very strong person, not only a strong person, but a person who went out of the way to help another country which was very subjugated, the people who felt enslaved and freed them. So she got a very good support, good name.
The Bangladesh victory also brought about new popularity equations. Sam Manekshaw emerged as the idol of the time, a military hero turned popular icon. And Indira Gandhi's insecurities emerged once again, that iron side of her that refused a challenger.
Unfortunately, she was very insecure. And therefore, any rival center of power that she saw coming up anywhere around her immediately had to be squashed.
After the brief interlude of Indira on a high, wrangles emerged again. In 1975, the Allahabad High Court ruled that Indira Gandhi was to be banned from Parliament for 6 years for misusing the government machinery for her 1971 election. The seeds of protest sown by Raj Narayan and others in 1971 had borne fruit. Anti-Indira protests led by the opposition broke out. Singhasan Khali Karo ke Janata Aati Hai became Jayaprakash Narayan's slogan as he called for army revolt. Less than 2 weeks after the High Court decision against her, on June 25, 1975, Indira broke all democratic norms.
From 71, she was very afraid that her election might be set aside. And in 75, her election was set aside. And at that time, Jayaprakash Narayan asked for her resignation. And then she claimed the emergency. and put Jayaprakash Narayan, Morarji Desai, all the top political leaders in jail.
Press had been gagged. About 100,000 people had been detained without trial. There was fear. Government servants had become instruments of tyranny.
Indira's son Sanjay Gandhi and his stooges unleashed a wave of political terror never seen before. Indira played havoc under the garb of the Maintenance of Internal Security Act, MISA. The media was censored, the right to free speech removed, though some tried to keep their heads above the water.
Indian Express would, while staying within that kind of limits, would report certain things, would say certain things, which other did not at all, because it was a marginal land. So, in fact, Indian Express became the symbol of freedom those days. What she was doing was all against the character, against all that Nehru stood for.
She amended the constitution beyond recognition. Several amendments, particularly the 42nd Amendment.
It was at this time that the Supreme Court again took up the government's powers on amending the constitution. And Nani Palkhiwala, arguing for Indira's demands, came out on top. Indira's powers became absolute.
We were expecting right till the time that the judgment was reserved, that they will confirm the decisions of the High Court. But when the judgment was delivered, we were shocked. 4 judges took such a view, which was thoroughly illegal.
After extending the state of emergency twice, in 1977, Indira Gandhi called for elections to give the electorate a chance to vindicate her rule. In March that year, the emergency was finally withdrawn. And with it came the people's verdict, a strong decision against her return to power. She lost her Lok Sabha seat too, and Morarji Desai took over at the head of a Janata Party coalition. Look back over those 21 months, June 1975 to March 1977.
At one point in the Congress today, Mahatma Gandhi said that after independence, there will be no tears on anybody's cheeks. There will be roof, there will be work, there will be plenty to eat. So these are things that don't seem happening in the near future. I don't know when it would happen. So I think the impact of the emergency on the present and the future is that the value system is gone.
But over her larger tenure at the country's helm, Indira did make a difference to people's lives. One that was full of positives.
Despite that stigma of the emergency that she declared, I place her heads above all the politicians that we've had so far, including her father.
As someone once said of the times, India is Indira, and Indira is India.